if we take this out of the UK context and we look at the broader global context, where British output and even Western output is in decline, economic output, etc., the Eastern countries are on the rise, and I think that by 2050 it's estimated that we'll have declined even more than we have now. If you take this kind of view, is there value in a united Europe in terms of whether it's economic or in any other way, as a sort of unified bloc? And do you think that we should be keeping our eye on that global ball? And also the relationship, the special relationship with America, that's obviously a two-way street. And does Britain have any relevance to America as a much more isolated unit?
So, in theory, I think in many ways it would seem to make sense to try and have a more integrated European economy, which can compete with the rest of the world as a unified bloc. That works in theory. In practice, we have something rather different. We don't have a single European economy. We still have national economies. And in the context of the Eurozone, they're actually forced to compete with one another, because a country that can't change the value of its currency can only become more or less competitive through wages and prices. And so you have an internal process of quite intense competition between countries within the Eurozone. But there is no integrated and single European economic bloc. But I would say that even if there was, that argument really goes down the lines of we have to slim down Europe's welfare states, we have to slim down the kind of support that's provided to poorer people, we have to be very tough on wages across Europe in order to compete with the rest of the world. So those who make that argument, I think, are suggesting that kind of outcome, and I don't find any of that very convincing. I think it's possible to be competitive globally without having to simply give up what Europe has achieved over the last 200 years in terms of social equality and social policies and the welfare state.
So you think that there is a route forward that is beneficial to Europeans, and that involves maintaining these kinds of organisations. The EU is one, but there are others. How would we, if you were an advisor to the government, what would you say to them now? What would be a potential, maybe not in the short term because that's quite tricky, but sort of what's the way forward?
Well, I think I'm not sure it's compatible with the EU as it exists. I think, in my view, I think the Eurozone should be dismantled. I think it's been a source of great tension. It's deepened inequalities between countries. It's not led to economic convergence at all. So I think that actually hinders progress rather than facilitates it.
Yeah.
But what I would say is that I think the focus should really be on raising productivity, which is not an easy thing to achieve in the short term, but in the medium term comes through investing in people, essentially, in education. And I think Europe still has a pretty good claim to being the part of the world that is most competitive in terms of having a highly educated workforce.
Yeah.
And there are certainly some sectors of the global economy where Europe can specialise in, and I think it should focus on that.
You're speaking as a bloc.
Well, so as a bloc, this could happen, but I don't think in order for that to be achieved, I think you also need to give some room for manoeuvre to national governments in order to pursue what we used to call industrial policy, pursue growth policies. And the problem with the European Union as it stands is that attempts by governments to pursue those kinds of policies fall foul of a lot of EU legislation.
So you think that the technocratic model has hindered independent states' attempts to develop in fairer policy or fairer growth or more growth?
I would call it the technocratic model. It is technocratic, but I would call it the one-size-fits-all model.
Right.
I don't think that is at all appropriate. We have a situation in the Eurozone where one country, Germany, feels that the Eurozone is beginning to pick up, prices are beginning to pick up, perhaps we should raise interest rates. Now, there are other parts of the Eurozone to whom that would be catastrophic to raise interest rates. This is absolutely the wrong time to do it. Now, who wins out in that battle? That's a one-size-fits-all policy that clearly doesn't suit everybody. And I don't think that's working.